I'm willing to bet actually every new sewer has had the experience of making up a sewing pattern and it being an entire size too big or too small or just completely different than you were expecting. There are so many measurements on the pattern that it's hard to know what is the ones that you need to actually go by. Because as a new sewer, reading a pattern is one of those skills that you really need to learn. So in this video, I want to talk with you the difference between body measurements, garment measurements, just what are the measurements that you need to know, that you really need to know to actually start getting more control in what size that you select for yourself. Welcome, my lovely ladies and gents, my sewing friends. It is very lovely to see your smiling faces here again. Now, if we are actually just meeting for the first time, welcome. My name is Evelyn Wood, and here on this channel we do everything vintage dressmaking skills for our modern day sewing to really get better at garment making and really understand what we're doing so we can create anything that we want. So if that sounds like what you're after, do hit the subscribe button down below so that YouTube knows that you would like to see my future videos. Because this particular video is part of a series of 3 different videos about how to better read a pattern and understand what a pattern is to start selecting and get more control in choosing a better size for yourself, because fitting and choosing the right sizes on patterns is one of the most frustrating things when we get started. And the first video is on ease, and that video, all these videos will be linked down below in the description box. So that is understanding what ease is, why it is on a pattern, and what we need it for. Now, ease is extra room in the pattern for either movement or design. Go watch the video for a bigger explanation. So we know that we need ease on the pattern, but the problem is there's often way too much ease. And so how do we find how much ease is on a pattern? That is our topic of today. So the key to finding ease is the measurements. Yeah, this is my first rule of using a sewing pattern, and that is the size, the number that you buy in the shops, your ready to wear size that you buy clothes from usually. Get that number, scrunch it up, and we throw it in the trash, because those numbers are absolutely non-applicable to what we are doing in sewing here now. So the size that you would buy in ready to wear clothes is not the same sizing as pattern sizes at all. So, and even think about this. This is US sizings, this side is European sizings, and guess what? I'm in Australia, so none of this even applies to me whatsoever. So you can see how they're just numbers, and we no longer use our ready-to-wear size at all, ever, no. So what we do use is body measurements. From now on, as a fully fledged sewist, dressmaker, seamstress, whatever the word is that you like, we only go by body measurements. So why is this? Well, for one thing, it's not interpretive. So your body measurement is your body measurement. Doesn't matter what country you're in, doesn't matter what number a brand wants to call a certain size. We go by body measurements, and that's what the pattern envelopes go by. So generally you're going to need a bust, a waist, and a hip measurement. So these are pretty easy to get. Doing the lengths and measurements is definitely important, but it's kind of the next step. So once you get the basic size down, going to lengths and different shaping options is more fit, and I would class that as sort of the next step as you go up the rung in the sewing skills ladder, so to say. So we're talking about sizing at the moment, a standard size. And that's where just a bust, a waist, and a hip is good enough. And you'll see those pretty much on every single pattern. They're the measurements that you're going to find that you need. But then why is it that when you make up the size that it tells you to for your body measurements, that it turns out so big? This is ease. So the pattern companies put on extra amounts in over your body measurements, which is ease, and you need it there to fit and for the design. But they often put so much there. How do we know what the garment is going to be when it's made up? This is, it's very simple, but not necessarily easy. So The trick is the real measurements that you need to look for are the finished garment measurements. Now, not every pattern is going to have these on there, which is very, very frustrating. I say that we all sewists get together and petition all the pattern companies to write how much ease is on the patterns, but that is another story. So what we want to look for is the finished garment measurements. So quite often on the back of the pattern envelope, you'll see a little box and it will have finished garment measurements, but it might only say lengths as well, like this one. So it'll give you the back length, for instance, the back length from your back neck down to the bottom of the skirt, which these measurements are needed, but not at the beginning. That's kind of the next level. We're taking the first step here. We just want our size, not the personal fitting yet. So, you know, whilst the lengths are good, not always what we're looking for. We're looking for size right now. So with further investigation, you can probably find more information. So when you start to have a look on the patterns, you'll often find that some of them are printed on the patterns, which is very nice of the pattern companies to write the finished garment measurements on here for us. So you'll often see it'll only be printed on one piece. So maybe always start looking at the center front of a bodice section. That's probably sort of like the main pattern piece, so to say, the center front. So have a look on that one first. It'll only probably be printed once. And you can see here on this one, so it tells us the bust finished garment measurements for each of the sizes. Now this one does tell us total ease above body measurements is approximately 4 inches or 10 centimeters. So that's even better. They've gone a step further and given us the measurements. Unfortunately though, they only do give us the finished garment measurements of the bust. That's it. And as you know, we are more than just our bust measurement, and we're different shapes, sizes. We need bust, waist and hip usually are the 3 sort of points, depending, I mean, a hip doesn't matter for a top, of course. But we need those measurements to really guide us to pick the right size for our different proportions and shapes. So all of the different pattern companies, of course, have different amounts and different standardized amounts of ease that they put on a pattern. So how do we actually work out the ease? Just say it didn't tell us here, because I can tell you that often what they write here is not exactly what it measures in real life. So it's close, but usually not quite right. That's just my little tip between us, okay? So let's do a quick example here to find out how much ease is maybe in the pattern. So we want our body measurements. So I'm a 36 inch. Now that is going to tell me to do a size 14, so size 14. Now if I have a look on my pattern here, size 14, it says the finished garment measurements are 40 inches. And so how do we find the ease? We go the 40 inches of the finished garment measurement minus our body measurements of 36 inches equals how much ease is on the pattern. Bang, easy as, right? Yeah, so that is how we can figure out how much ease is on the pattern. Now this does rely on what they tell us, the information that they give us on the patterns. So do some investigating. Different brands have them printed in different areas. They will have different, some do bust, some will do a waist, some will give you all of them. Indie patterns are going to be different again, and often better in this department in figuring out what the finished garment measurements are. But they're all different, and it just requires some investigating from you. So, I mean, this is just a scratching of the surface. When you really want to take this to the next level, you can learn how to measure the pattern pieces so that you can figure out what the finished garment measurements will be for any pattern. Doesn't matter whether it tells you or not. You can figure out the bust, the waist, the hip, and really start to know what the finished garment's going to be, so you can better determine what size you want it to fit like. This is kind of the next level, that we go to in vintage sewing schools. So if this is really kind of the what you want to do, you want to really go deep and understand the patterns and how they work, so that you can really only use a pattern as a tool only, and it's not the be all end all of sewing. That's the kind of thing that we do. So I do invite you to come join us at vintagesewingschool.com. It's all online. Everything's pre-recorded, so it's all, on your time. You can learn on your own schedule whenever you like. So I'm really excited. I do hope that you'll consider joining me there, because we go really deep on this, like how to pick the right size is a huge topic that requires lots of things. But I want to show you here what is available to us just on the pattern envelopes to get you going, get you started, because there is so much we can make better choices with. Now, as I said, the pattern companies all have different standards to what they would consider a perfect fit. So everything's different. You can do some research as well and maybe find out which companies have what as standard sizes, but it doesn't take much to kind of learn how to use these really well. Now, there are some very, very good points here to keep in mind. When we look at this is looking at a standard size only. This isn't our personal fitting adjustments from here. This is just the standard stock size, bigger or smaller. So personal fitting is then on top of being able to find out how much is, because proportionally you might have a bigger bust and narrower hips, or the opposite, more like me, bigger hips and narrower through the waist. So we're always going to have different areas that are, away from standard, whatever standard is. There is no standard, we all know this, but often like from the size here. So personal fit is on top of this as well. Now, it's really important to take note that most companies are only making patterns for a size B or C cup only. So no matter if you increase the size of your garment, the whole thing will just get bigger, but the actual cup bust size won't get like bigger. It'll just like the whole thing just expands like this rather than actually going cup size bigger. So that's really important to remember. Again, goes on the personal fitting from here, from the size. So knowing what the finished garment will be before you've made it up, you can see how this really, this is the most valuable information that we can really use as sewers to start determining what size we want to use, and how we use all this information, what we've done in these past two videos now, how we know ease, now we know how to find the ease. The next video in this series is going to be next week, and will be how do we use this information to pick a better size. And I have a few little ninja tips for you as well on how to do this. So I'm really looking forward to those. If you're watching this in the future, of course, they are already linked down below in the description box. So go check there for all of the links to everything I've mentioned in this video. I would really love to know, have you actually used finished garment measurements before, or is this the first time you're hearing about it? If you have used them, let us know in the comments as well, maybe where you have found them on the pattern or different pattern companies, any advice you have for any of the other sewers that are watching this. Do write that down there, because the more information we all share with each other, the easier it is for us to all learn this hard task of selecting the right size. I appreciate all of your comments and wisdom down there, as I'm sure everybody else does. Thank you so very much for watching. Check the description box below for those links, and until next time, happy sewing, my friends.